So it's been a little while. Had to take some time to get a couple things straightened out for school, had some papers and all of that, but I'm back and I want to jump into chapter two this week, but I want to make sure that I do a little wrap up of chapter one because there is a few things. There's a couple things that are going on in the background. One, I don't know if we mentioned it, but this letter is written sometime almost certainly before 70 AD, probably in late 50s, going into the 60s, perhaps. And that would mean there's a lot of unrest. Um, Rich versus poor was a big issue. Wealthy landowners was a big issue. A lot of the revolt that the Romans came to quell and quench had to do with, you know, land owners abusing their workers. So when you see a passage like, 120, the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God, it's something to keep in mind. So, rich versus poor is an issue at this time. But a little bit deeper than that, I noted um, that there's a there's a comparing and there's a pairing. There's a pairing of two ideas, and it seems like they're always intertwined. And I thought I'd just kind of wrap up chapter one by um, hopefully helping you see what this pairing is and how it relates to the rest of the book. Um, there's two words that seem to be kind of swimming back and forth, twirling back and forth with each other. Um, it's steadfast, the idea of steadfastness and perseverance versus the idea of deception, being deceived. And you'll see it because it's here. In chapter 1, verse 3 and 4, you see steadfastness is all over the place. The purpose of testing your faith is to produce steadfastness. And not long after verse 4, you're in verse 7, 6 and 7, which talks about the doubting man, right? The man that doubts, who's double minded. Um, but beyond that, verse 7 says, "For that man must not suppose that he will receive anything from the Lord." Don't fool yourself, in other words. Don't fool yourself into thinking that you can be a doubter and receive from God. Okay? So steadfastness and avoid deception. Verse 12 picks up the same idea. Blessed is the man who remains steadfast under trial. For when he has stood the test, he will receive the crown of life that God promises to those who love him. That's verse 12. Verse 16, very closely following, do not be deceived, my beloved brothers. Why is steadfastness why are steadfastness and deception continuously following each other? You have to think that once you get past two pairs, right? But then uh here we go again, verse 22. Verse 22 says, "But be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving yourselves. For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he's like a man, the analogy, we talked about it, looking in the mirror and so forth and so on." But then he contrasts that man with someone else, the one who's looking into the mirror and forgets. He contrasts with the next guy in verse 25. "But the one who looks into the law of liberty, and perseveres." It's right here, uh, the one who looks into the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer, right, who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. Again, the connection between steadfastness and blessing, right? We saw that earlier in verse 12, and we see it again in verse 25. Steadfastness and deception, right? Um, I think James is trying to get something across. We see steadfastness, then don't be deceived. Steadfastness, then don't be deceived. Don't be deceived, but be steadfast. The main point, it seems to me, his main concern, not only for this chapter, but really for the letter, is that, okay, you guys were here with me in Jerusalem. We were following Jesus together, right? And now trials have come. Trouble is at our doorstep. Trouble has actually forced us away from our doorstep. So many have left Jerusalem because of the persecution that well, not the apostle Paul, but Saul brought to their door. So Paul or Saul drives them out, but James wants to reel them back in. And here's how he's doing it. He's saying the trials are here for your steadfastness, but don't be deceived. If you don't persevere, if you don't keep going and following Jesus, loving him, then you're only fooling yourself. Just because you know the word, just because you've heard it, just because you say you believe it, the only way to know for sure is, are you persevering? Perseverance is his main concern. And if we don't persevere in the midst of whatever trials that we're in, the same is true for us. We can say we believe, but what matters is our perseverance. Because perseverance with the Lord is what he's done with us. He has persevered with us. His patience, his kindness, his love. Man, God has been good. And we don't have to persevere with him. We have to persevere with the trials of this life, many of which are self inflicted. But I just wanted to bring that out, the deception and steadfastness, uh, two things that you cannot avoid if you're reading this. Just got to read a little closely to get it. All right. So that's it for chapter one. That's my wrap up, a little bit of analysis, and chapter two coming up later this week. All right. God bless you.